Hello, students. Today we're going to be talking about multi-tiered support systems and using data to guide instruction. What is a multi-tiered support system, or MTSS? It's a framework that helps districts or schools provide students with the academic, behavioral, and social emotional support that they need to be able to be successful. What is RTI? RTI stands for Response to Intervention. It is a school-based approach that helps students who are struggling with academics or behavior. So how is MTSS and RTI different? They're both educational strategies. They both help students, but they're different in their scope, their purpose, and their approach. MTSS has a broader approach and it addresses the whole child, every single aspect, wanting to make sure that the student is meeting the standards and skills that they need to be able to be successful. It also helps schools identify and intervene with struggling students as early as possible, the better. Students are screened at the very beginning of the school year to be able to set up the tiers that they're going to be in and provide that support that they need throughout the entire school year. MTSS and RTI both have a tiered approach, but MTSS includes collaboration and community between teachers, parents, administrators, gifted specials teachers, ELL teachers, special education teachers, everyone. It's a whole group, which also brings us to the fact that the structure that schools use to help them organize that staff to be able to work together and to have assessments, the instruction, and the resources they need to be able to implement whatever the child needs to be able to be successful. RTI, it only focuses on academics, but some schools or districts have implemented PBIS as a component of RTI to help address the behavioral aspect of it. You might hear some school districts saying that students are needing to be referred to like an SST team or a PBIS team, and that is kind of a component of RTI. It also provides effective instruction intervention to all students. However, it's not identifying them as early as what an MTSS would. It still uses a tiered approach, and it still uses assessments to screen, collect, diagnostic information, and to monitor student progress. However, a lot of times this information is not collected until after the need has already been there instead of right at the beginning. One key feature is that RTI is an integral part of multi-tier support system, and it's where we will normally see something called tier 2. So why is MTSS a thing now? And it's becoming a thing not only in Southwest Missouri, but the entire state of Missouri and in the US. It's a thing because it addresses the whole child and makes sure that all of their needs are being met at school, so that way they can be successful all around. It helps intervene as early as possible with students that are struggling to be able to get them back to grade level. And it's a collaboration. It's a community. The students are not my students or your students. They are our students, and we are all going to work towards meeting their needs and making sure that they are successful at school. With MTSS, you're going to see a lot of different kind of tiered layers. All of them mean about the same type of things, but school districts and school buildings have adapted some of those tiers to make it fit for their needs. But before we get to those, I do want to talk about how we need to make sure that students have Maslow before they can bloom. If students are not able to have their immediate needs met of clothing, food, shelter, belonging, the relationships, they're never going to be able to get the academics that they need. So building relationships within your classroom and with the students that you have is so important, because if you are able to meet those students at a relational level, then they are going to feel more safe and secure at school. And that's going to allow them to be able to really advance in their academics. If those needs are not being met, no matter how much teaching you do or how you do it, they are never going to learn anything. So MTSS is an umbrella term. It is a way to have prevention for all students, enrichment for all students, and an intervention for all students. We are talking about every child and the whole child. We already talked about how we want to make sure that we have parents engaged and are part of that community working to do what's best. It's teamwork. It's a group approach to being able to meet their needs. There's a lot of school and community and district collaboration around multi-tier support systems. It includes professional development, so that way teachers can get the skills they need to be able to best intervene and either push the students or support the students to be able to push them. It focuses on preparing students for college, career, military service, whatever it is that they want to do after graduation. And it's a way of curriculum design. Teachers are put onto a curriculum team, so that way they can have a firsthand approach to being able to know what's going in and being able to break apart those standards. Some key features of MTSS is it's team-based implementation. It's not one teacher, it's not one group of teachers, it's the entire team in a building implementing it. We use a lot of universal screenings for MTSS to make sure that students are identified as early as possible and the skills they need can be implemented to help them grow. We are always using evidence-based instructions. You'll hear a lot about letters training around the nation right now. Letters training is an evidence-based intervention. We are seeing tons of growth with it. It's just a fantastic approach to be able to help students learn how to read early. You will hear about content expertise and fluency. The way I was able to learn so much about academics is because of MTSS and being on curriculum teams and being part of the curriculum writing process within my district. Everything that has to do with MTSS is data-based. Every decision is based on data. It's not what you think or what you feel or what you perceive is happening. It's based on data. Like, give me the numbers. And then once you have those numbers, then you problem solve to figure out whatever is going on. The entire school or district should be implementing it with fidelity. The best success is going to be coming from everyone being on the same page, and then also everyone continuously monitoring the progress of the students to make sure that they are progressing towards those goals. There is MTSS for both academics and behavior, but both of them can be put on a tiered system. This is from another district in Missouri that put both together on one, but it has 3 tiers. Every model that you'll see has 3 tiers. Most of students are going to be in tier 1. Most students academically are going to be approaching grade level or on grade level and be able to do the regular curriculum. The students that can't, maybe 10 to 25% of those, they may need a little bit of extra help to be able to master the grade level skills or the priority standards that you've set to be able to be where they need to be. When this happens, this is where the kind of the RTI process comes into play. You're going to reteach those skills to that student until they are able to master those skills. If a student cannot do those and they become, severely behind on their grade level instruction, maybe 2 grade levels or more behind, they might have an IEP. They're going to fall into this tier 3 category. That's where they're going to receive daily individualized intervention until they can meet those skills. On the other side, behavior. Every student in the school should be able to behave in the correct way. So these students are going to fall into this. But if you have a student that is sometimes not being able to follow those expectations, then they're going to fall into a tier 2 group. This group is going to meet with maybe a school counselor or a behavior interventionist to be able to address that skill specifically, that one skill, and practice that skill with that student or ask them how they're doing until they are able to move back into that tier 1 with that skill. In some cases, you have students that have extreme behaviors. And in those cases, those students should probably have a behavior IEP, but those students are going to have a person that they check in with or a behavior interventionist, maybe a special education teacher that is going to directly work with that student on the skill that they are missing according to their IEP. Some of the pyramids look like this. The district that this came from, they wanted to show that most of the students are going to be right here in this green spot. This is all students. All students should be getting this instruction, whether it's academic or behavior. The students right here, it's only some. These students are getting this and this. So they're getting a double dose of whatever that skill is. The students in the red should be getting the green, the yellow, and the red. They are getting the tier 1, the tier 2, and the tier 3. So that way, that's part of the intensive. We want to make sure that they are getting it and seeing it as much as possible, whether it's academic or behavior. At the Carthage Intermediate Center, this is a pyramid that they use. They flipped it upside down to show, we're working from the top and working our way down. But here we see that all students are getting that tier 1 instruction. They're all working on curriculum, those priority standards. The tier 2 instruction, that's where students are going to be in small groups to fill in the gaps that might be missing. And then the tier 3 is that intense small group instruction. Title I services typically fall into a tier 2 skill, but some school districts, including like Carthage School District, a lot of times the students that qualify for Title I services may also be that tier 3 time. Tier 3 is also going to be your special education students and your English language learners. I will put this slideshow on our sorry, I'm losing the word. I will put this slideshow on Blackboard so that way you can go in and read a little bit closer if you want to have time to read what this is. But this is a breakdown of tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 instruction. Just keep in mind that tier 1 is all, tier 2 is targeted or group, small group, and tier 3 is intensive. It's usually individual, 1 student, maybe 2 students at a time. This is what a schedule would look like in maybe an elementary grade level or a grade level before. Students would be having the same class, like you would be teaching the same topic every single day, like maybe junior high or middle school. Tier 1 math, all students should be in the room getting that grade level instruction. Same with tier 1 reading and social studies, tier 1 writing, and tier 1 science. If students are not meeting their needs here, they're going to be addressed here in tier 2 small groups. These students are shared with other people in the building. This is where you would see typically like your RTI that a lot of districts do. And this is where you're going to, for a couple of weeks, focus on one skill and hit that skill hard until those students master that skill and are able to say that they can move out of tier 2. During tier 3, this is where special education, English language learners, Title I, speech, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and ideally gifted services would be pulled from this time. So the only students that should be left in a general education classroom would be students that are that middle of the road students, and teachers have that time where they can kind of work on some of those tier 1 skills that they may not have mastered or in tier 1 or in tier 2, and they can maybe hit on those during tier 3 because the other students are getting their individualized instruction more targeted during that time. And we're going to look at some data that's used for these tier 2, tier 3 groups later on in the presentation. So when we're doing any type of academic or behavioral process, there's 4 questions that we should always ask ourselves. You're going to see those 4 questions over and over again in the next 3 slides. The first question we want to ask is, what do we want the students to learn? In tier 1, it's priority grade level standards. How will we know if they have learned it? We should have some type of common unit assessment that's based on the proficiency scales for the priority standards. What are we going to do if they haven't learned it? We are going to use that assessment to put them into tier 2 groups. And then we're going to have a targeted approach where they are in small groups and focus on that tier 2 time of that skill until they master it. And what do we do if they have learned it? During tier 2, there should always be an enrichment group or an accelerated group. And during that time, those students can move on to the next unit. They can work on more advanced coursework. They can work on passion projects or do creative writing. There are a lot of different things that students can do. These are not just necessarily gifted students. They may just be students that mastered that skill already, but there's a lot of things they can do other than help a friend or read a book. And we're going to talk about more of that next week. During tier 2, what do we do if the students have learned it? We decide, or what do we want our students to learn? We have to decide the specific skill that we're working on and focus on that skill until they have it mastered. How will we know if they have learned it? We're going to create common formative assessments to assess where students are, where they're at. And based on those common formative assessments, that's how we're going to determine which tier group they are and if they are ready to move out of tier 2 back into tier 1 for that skill. What do we do if they haven't learned it? We are going to reteach that skill during tier 3 until that student has mastered it. And what do we do if they have learned it? Again, we're going to move them back to that tier 1 time. We're going to provide academic enrichment to them. And finally, the tier 3 process. What do we want students to learn? We want them to grow. We want them to be able to develop their reading and math skills, and any other skills. This doesn't necessarily have to be for reading and math. It can be for any type of special classes. It can be any type of gifted classes, anything. But we want them to be able to grow and develop at their pace and level. How do we know if they've learned it? By using screeners and diagnostic assessment data. What do we do if they haven't learned it? We're going to continue instructing that student on their lowest level of deficit. And what will we do if they have learned it? Again, we're either going to move them back to tier 2 or back to tier 1. We're going to give them enrichment opportunities like these listed here below. That way they can continue advancing. Behavior multi-tier support systems. It's really important that if you're doing a behavior multi-tier support system, that the entire building has common language, you have common building expectations, goals for what you want the behavior to look like in your building, and procedures that all staff members are following. When you're looking at tier 1, this is behavior that should be happening from all students. You can keep track of office managed behaviors. In Carthage, they keep track of their tiger traits is what they call it. It's responsible, respectful, honest, and safe. Keep track of if students are doing those skills or not. If a student cannot handle behavior that is an expected behavior in the school, they're going to go to a tier 2 targeted intervention where, again, a counselor or a behavior teacher is going to check in with them, maybe a classroom teacher, and they're working towards mastering that skill and getting back to tier 1 or graduating back to tier 1. In some cases, they can't handle that and they're moved into tier 3. These are students that are having severe behaviors over and over again that the tier 2 interventions are not helping to improve. And in those cases, those students a lot of times are going to end up on a behavior IEP, but they need more specialized instruction and approaches to be able to master those behavior skills. Everything that is done when it comes to MTSS is data-based. You have to have data. Data covers the teacher. When you're having parent-teacher conferences, you can show the parents, this is why I did this. This is where they are at right here. This is how many times they were disciplined for this. Data is going to help you guide what you are going to do in each of those tiered levels, whether it's academics or behaviors. So it's important. It's not something that teachers enjoy, but it's something that has to be done. This is one way of looking at data. This is, I believe, 4th grade, some reading standards. It looks like there's 2 reading standards, 2 writing standards, and 2 language standards here. When we're looking at this data, this would be a team would get together, or it could even be done by just one teacher. But right here, when I'm looking at this, to me, either the teacher did not do a very good job instructing on text features or the students are just not getting it. Same with writing a draft. But when I look over here at text connections, the teacher knocked this out of the park or the students were just grasping it really quickly. So when we're thinking about this text connections, the students that got yellow or red here, those students might need some small group instruction to help shore up those missing skills that they're having, but the teacher can pretty well move on with that. Same with this category right here, capitalization. There are a few students that still need some work on that, but the teacher doesn't need to spend a lot of time on it. However, the teacher may need to go back and reteach text features. However, do not make those 7 students that have mastered it do all of that work over again. That's a good time for them to have differentiation and be able to have enrichment. The teacher could also reteach this during tier 2 or tier 3 time to focus on that instruction to get them to that tier 1 level. Here's another example. This example is one of my examples from when I taught 4th grade math. There was a common formative assessment that was given. It included being able to identify place value, comparing numbers, and then rounding numbers. When we looked at this data, This student mastered these two skills, but was lacking here. So they would go in a group that was focused on rounding. This student did not get place value, but somehow got comparing and rounding. Typically, you would not have a student not get place value, but would get comparing and rounding. But for whatever reason, this student did. So we're going to put this student in the place value group to be able to hit on that skill a little bit more. These students right in here, they are showing mastery on all three things. So they're going to be in the extension group or the high group. They're going to be focusing on the next grade level standards or doing some type of enrichment project, breakouts, brain teasers, things like that. That's going to still actively engage their mind, but not bore them by learning the same content again. This student right here and these students down here, you can see that they have deficits in place value and in rounding. This is where teachers have to kind of make that decision. Are they going to be able to round if they cannot identify place value? Or maybe they made a silly mistake on place value and they can do place value, but what we really need to work on is more rounding. In this case, I, as the teacher, had decided that this student really did not have a grasp of place value, and so I put them in the place value group. There are going to be times, though, where like this student only missed one question. It was only worth 3 points. I may think, oh yeah, that kid really does. Or I might have them answer a couple of extra place value questions and be like, okay, you've got this, and go ahead and put them in the rounding group. Each student has to be thought about individually, but you're going to be doing this with a team of teachers, hopefully. So the process for a multi-tier support system is the teacher team gets together and you analyze the data. You're looking for strengths and weaknesses with students and with teachers. Sometimes one teacher might have great scores on something, like on the first data set that we were looking at, that teacher had great scores on text connections, but their scores on text features were low. Well, maybe a different teacher is opposite of that. So maybe they need to trade ideas and figure out what the other person was doing to teach that, because something was working differently for the other person. Based on this data, you're going to put students in groups based on their missing skills, and you're going to pair them with a teacher that is strong in teaching that skill. The teacher is going to reteach that information for 30 minutes a day, every day for 2 weeks, hopefully with a different teacher. And at the end of that 2 weeks, you're going to reassess the student and see if they grew during that time period. If they did and they can move out of that skill back into tier 1, then you're good. If not, you may need to find time to be able to continue to reteach that child the instruction in a small group until they are able to master it. This is the multi-tier support system process. It's a very intense process. It's not going to be something that you're going to walk into a school and you're going to understand right away. It does take time to be able to learn how to differentiate. This is just one way that school districts in our area are implementing differentiation to do what's best for students. If you have any questions about this, please feel free to reach out. I'd love to speak with you more about it.